All right, so thank all of you for coming tonight. This is great. I know we have a lot of students here. We have some non-students, some old folks as well. I am not looking at you, Andy. But yeah, thank you for coming. We are going to be doing just a lot of Q&A, and I want people to be ready to ask questions tonight. I'm going to be asking a bunch of questions as we're going along. I want you to ask. Feel free to raise your hand and things like that after we get going, and we'll get this thing going. So, all righty. So my name is Eric Greenlief. I'm with the Visual Effects Society, and we have several amazing folks up here who have been in the games industry. I think I added this up, and we're almost like 120 years, all of us put together in the games industry or something like that. So yeah, we have a lot of experience up here. I'm going to start on the end. Amy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Amy Madden. It's nice to meet everyone. I've been in recruiting for 15 years, close to there. At least 12 of those have been in games, and then I did a few years in visual effects and animation. So this is my wheelhouse, so I'm excited for all of your questions.
Do you want us to use the mics?
Go ahead.
I was supposed to do that, wasn't I? I was supposed to do that again. Test number 1 failed. I failed already. So you can give me an F today already starting. Amy Madden in the microphone. I've been in recruiting for about 15 years, like I said, and specifically been in games and visual effects and animation. So.
Hi, I'm Joey. I'm also a recruiter. I've been in games for about 6 years, starting with Roblox and UGC stuff, Bungie, now in Epic. Adam and I worked together for a while, and it's great to get to see the rest of you too.
Hello, I'm gonna get used to talking into this because it's weird. So my name is Matt Collins. I actually went to DigiPen, and I think I met with some of you guys not that long ago. There you go. So I started out at DigiPen. I eventually went to Nintendo. I worked at Nintendo for 3 years. I was sort of a jack of all trades. I moved on over to Turn 10. I worked at Turn 10 on the Forza series basically from its inception all the way to basically when it shut down. So Forzas 1 through 8 for 21 years. I left there to go, and I was the art director for Turn 10. And then I left there to go to Cliffhanger to make Black Panther. And just recently, last year, I moved over to Battlefield. And so I'm the world art director at Battlefield. And that's been super fun. So happy to talk to you guys.
I'm Steve Theodore. This is year 31, I think, in games. I've been bouncing around the Seattle games industry for a long, long time. So a lot of places within, maybe 10-minute drives of here. Currently I'm at Santa Monica Studios. And I've also, been a hiring manager and whatever for the majority of that time. So it'll be interesting to see how it's changed.
Alrighty, and my name is Eric Greenleaf, as I mentioned before. I've been in the games for, I think it's 29 years now, something like that. So we're getting old, we're getting up there. What we're going to be talking about tonight is something that I'm passionate about. I've done a lot of mentoring with folks and helped artists put their portfolios together and help them with interview things. How to do interviews and stuff like that. So this is actually a thing I'm pretty passionate about. And I'm sure all of you up here have seen hundreds, if not thousands, of portfolios and resumes and done hundreds of interviews. So, sometimes when we get in these conversations online and things like that, and there are a lot of things that people are talking about, and we look at it, we're like, that really doesn't matter, things like that. So, and there are some things that people miss that are such important things when you're creating your portfolio, where do you put your portfolio and things like that. So these are some of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight, and really just help people out into getting their position in the industry. So, all right. So I'm going to start out with a couple of questions here, and I'm really curious about the hiring process. So Steve and Matt, you guys are hiring managers, and Joey and Amy, you are recruiters. So we have kind of both sides of the hiring portion of this, which I really like because then we get a couple of a variety of answers here. So I'm really curious. So one of my first questions is, when you're looking for folks, and this is specifically about the hiring process, when you're looking for folks for an artist position, where do you look? Like, how do you find people? And I think this will hopefully give us some insight into like how we advertise ourselves.
I guess I can start.
It's all you.
So it's usually a multitude of places. When we're looking for talent, especially if we're looking for specific talent, the first thing that we'll do is just word of mouth, asking around other people, hey, we're looking for this person. You guys just blast all the people that you know in different studios. Have you heard of X person? We'll start there. If we're not seeing anything there, we also obviously will hit ArtStation. That's one where we're looking for the best modelers or best vegetation artists. Let's look at vegetation portfolios that have been posted recently and see who kind of rises to the top and are they available, kind of looking at that. We're also coming to schools quite a bit, especially if we're looking for newer hires. So a lot of times we'll reach out to DigiPen, Ringling, just to kind of build up maybe a stable of potential people that when we're going to look for that position, we're like, oh, I remember talking to this student, they seemed really promising. We're going to look at potentially bringing them on, especially if we're looking for a more junior position. So it's a number of different spots. The internet, colleagues, and some of the connections that we've made with students are some of the first places that I go to look anyway.
I'd say, adding to that, I think that it's really important to think about, jobs aren't interchangeable. When you go into hire, you're thinking, you have sort of three big buckets. There's like the growth hire. You're looking for somebody who's early in their career. You're hoping they're going to stick around for a few years and you're going to invest in them and get something back. There's sort of the plug-in hire where that's those jobs that you've all probably seen if you looked around that are like need 5 years experience, must have done exactly this thing at your last job, right? They're often a mistake, honestly. When you're a hiring manager, it's like the lame choice, but they are common, right? And a lot of times you're in a rush and you have a hole you got to fill. And then there's the sort of like the real cherry pick hires where you want to build a department around some one person, or you're looking for world's greatest X or world's greatest Y. So those are all very, very different, right? The farther up that ladder you go, the more you're working word of mouth. It's the old boys and girls network. It's, oh yeah, I work with somebody at this company and they told me about this other person, so I'll get on LinkedIn and send them a message, right? So generally speaking, at the beginning of your career, you're kind of in the commodity end of the pool, and then in the later parts, and a lot of that is going to be exactly what Matt said. It's going to be ArtStation, it's going to be contests, people who showed up at an indie festival and were associated with a winning title, things like that. And then, farther on, it tends to move more down into the recruiting end of the thing. So maybe that's a good segue.
Go.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to start.
So both guys I think mentioned it quite a bit already, but really that online presence for us as recruiters is a big thing. We love the word of mouth, we love referrals, and that's always great. That doesn't always bring enough folks to the table for us when we have a dozen jobs maybe that we're working on hiring for at a time. So we get really comfortable with tools like ArtStation, like LinkedIn to some degree, really where we can see the art. We can type in a couple buzzwords, effects, character models, etc. And we can just look at hundreds of portfolios in an afternoon. And so for us, I think that visual representation is really important, especially if maybe you don't have those deep connections. Making sure that your online presence is built out and quite clear, which I know we'll talk a lot about later. For me, at least, that's where I spend dozens of hours every week. Is just scrolling and scrolling, seeing who I can find, who I think will be a good match for what a hiring manager is looking for.
Okay, I'll add a couple things here. So I think just networking in general is how you're going to get opportunities. So like everybody in this room, that maybe you're working on a project together that might help you get a new opportunity. I think it's actually just as important as when you're in a senior role versus a junior role. Literally every job I've been able to land, or the companies that I've worked for, is because I worked or met somebody else or another like classmate or someone else that I worked with before in the past. And so building those connections is really important. You can do that at these type of events, like I said, indie events, going to a GDC, going to a SIGGRAPH, like there's many events out there, and then you can participate and ask questions, meet industry folks. So I think that's like super important. I did that a lot. I went to an animation illustration school. I'm artist turned recruiter. And so that was something that the programs that I was in really promoted, and I think that's super important. The second thing is just going to be around, I think there's other things outside of just ArtStation, like certain disciplines are on YouTube, or they might have an animation reel or a lighting reel that's on YouTube, and so sometimes I'll be perusing that as well. There's other things for like UI UX or other disciplines as well that you can be on Dribbble, Behance, or other websites like that, that I am looking for talent in those areas as well, and so I will look on other sites as well outside of just ArtStation as well.
Oh, could I just wanted to add, GDC has got an interesting new format in the last year. So the pricing structure has changed, and it's a little easier to get in as a student. It's a different value proposition if you can manage to get in there. And if you're maybe not able to afford it, you can reach out to things like Amplifying New Voices, which will help people from underrepresented backgrounds to get the opportunity to get a ticket. That can be great. Now, it's not like you walk in and get a job, but it is a really good opportunity to meet people. Another thing you can do is you can be a CA, which is the conference associates, the volunteers who help run the show. They get to see everybody, and they get to meet one another, and then 5 years later, when they have jobs, they all know, oh yeah, we had a great time back in San Francisco. It's a good thing to know.
I think the networking aspect is great, and sometimes when people think about networking, a lot of it is, oh, I'm going to meet that person and then they're going to have a job for me, right? And that's not it whatsoever, right? Can you guys explain like how that networking helps and how kind of that actually operates?
I can do that one. Take that as like that networking is for learning, right? You're taking in the information, maybe there's an industry professional you're talking to. Try to get information about maybe the application process, what they're looking for, right? It's not that it's going to be, they're going to give you a job and they have the exact opening that you are specifically looking for. Instead, build a relationship with that person. I've had folks, like we said, some of us have all worked together before. There's a reason, because the industry is actually really small and a lot of people will work together at previous projects or vice versa. So now you've built that connection. Like I hope you all add me on LinkedIn after today, which should be a homework assignment, actually. And then we're gonna build that relationship. You're gonna have that relationship with me to say, hey, we met at the DigiPen event, right? Well, maybe there's going to be an opportunity of a job that's open. Maybe that's 2 years down the line, but we're going to remember that we were connected at that last time that we spoke, right? And so that's about keeping up the relationships. We worked together a little while ago. It's been a while since I've seen Joey, but we're here today because we were connected before, right? And we had that connection, so I think that's super important. Does that kind of make sense? Yes. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, and I also want to emphasize that that's not just early in career. Like that's the start. All of us up here are continuing to make connections and networks and things like that. And whatever opportunities you have to associate with folks, I'm going to do a plug on Visual Effects Society. A bunch of people in here I know just specifically because of Visual Effects Society. I'm not saying you have to join Visual Effects Society, but that's an example. You can't. But that's an example, right? I've met a ton of people just doing that one thing. And so all of those opportunities, just whatever you can do, get out there and get known. And then people will find you when they need you.
and it's kind of easy if you look at LinkedIn to think that networking is this kind of greasy activity where it's a little sleazy, right? The most effective tool you have as a networking person is just to be an interesting person to talk to, like a decent human being, somebody people will remember as, oh yeah, that's a pretty cool guy, yeah. Because you don't have a lot of capital at this stage in your career, right? But you will have heard something, right? You're an environment artist and you heard that a friend was talking about an animation job and you passed that on to another friend who's an animator. That is a favor. It's not a huge favor, but those things add up, right? People remember that. Somebody pings you on LinkedIn and said, hey, do you know so-and-so? And like you make the connection, right? Because doing those favors does two things. One is the obvious one, people kind of owe you. It's a little bit of a nice thing to have in your back pocket. The other thing, and this will come up a lot tonight, I'm pretty sure, is that for those of us on this side of the table, when we are hiring, the biggest thing that we worry about is not your skills. It is not like how awesome is your portfolio. It's, is this person a flake? Is this person toxic? Is this person going to screw up the team culture, right? And there's no better way to get over that than to have a friend who might know nothing about your professional life, but can vouch for you as a decent human being when somebody says, oh, you work with so-and-so, what do they, that is really, really important. And that's a big part of your professional identity. You want to curate carefully.
Steve, I'm glad you brought that up because this is actually a thing that I tell everybody on my team. You guys that have worked with me know this. It's like your skills, and I say your skills and your artistic ability and things like that, they're about 50% of what you do. Okay? That also goes in hiring. Like I can train a monkey to use our tools, right? But if I don't want to work with that monkey and they don't want to be around me and nobody wants to be around them and they don't communicate and all these other things, I'm not going to hire them, right? Is that the same you guys find?
Yeah, it's something I think I told some of you students when I talked a couple of weeks ago, is that early on I was heavily indexed on portfolio, and if their portfolio was awesome, it was like, it doesn't matter that they shivved me during the interview, their portfolio is so good. I'm on the opposite end of that spectrum as I get later in the career, and I find that has been much more successful. So the two things I look for now primarily to start is, can I work with this person? Can I see, do they have that history? Do I feel like they're going to be a good team fit? Not just can I work with them, but is the chemistry going to be good with the team? Because it's so much a part of good game development. And the other piece of that is it's not just the chemistry, but there's a certain class of people that are just like, they're always like, just go get them. You can give them anything. You'd be like, look, I don't know, you don't know how to fix a car, but you're just really good, and I need you to fix my car right now, and go out and figure it out. And they'll somehow figure it out. There's a class of sort of go-getters and like really intrepid that they just jump in there. I actually look for that almost more than anything else. Can they work with the team, and are they going to be that type of personality that you can almost put them in any situation and they'll figure out how to do a good job with it. And then I look at the portfolio. Do they actually have the skill set? And I found that looking at it that way has been much better for me and much better for the health of the team in figuring out who you want to work with.
And Matt, in doing that, do you find like that during interviews, if someone tells you that they can do all those things and they come in and they say, I can do that, and I can do that, and I can do that, like how do you judge that?
Oh man, that is what I would honestly say is it's the hardest thing to judge, and that's honestly where what you were mentioning before is that network comes in. So it's easier to look at a portfolio and say, are they skilled? Finding out if they're that type of person is harder to dig for. You know what I mean? So in that case, you are looking for concrete examples. You want to say, here, give me a specific scenario where you ran into this trouble and how did you solve it, and what is your problem solving skills? And if they're like, oh, I did this thing and it worked, then you're like, oh, then they probably, there's probably not a lot of meat there. But if they go into a really specific example and they walk the whole path and you can watch them think, then you're like, okay, I think I have that kind of person. It's really hard to know, but yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a hand too.
How do you view letters of recommendation?
Letter. Oh, sorry.
How do you view letters of recommendation?
Yeah.
I
I
don't
think,
really ask for it in the hiring process. It's
Yep.
pretty rare, actually.
Yep. which is
I
interesting.
don't know if we're taking questions, but I would just say from a recruiting standpoint, we're not really asking for that
Yeah,
most of the time.
and I think that's interesting, and like, I think that's a great example of, people can put a lot of effort into that, like, hey, they wanna go out and find great letters of recommendation and things like that, and I'm with Amy, it's like, I don't know if I've ever really looked at a letter of recommendation.
Everybody has one. And
Yeah.
And they're always, it's like, oh, my cousin is super good. You know, it's just really hard to tell because it's easy. They're in a way easy to get, but it's really hard to tell if those are, you know, maybe you can look at the titles, that kind of thing. But yeah.
Better on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has an option for that. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, that's where I was gonna go. One thing that is something that I will look at is LinkedIn recommendations. People will accumulate those over their career, and that's what makes them a great signal. You know, convincing one person to tell other people you're awesome is hard enough. But if, you know, you've been in the business for 8 to 10 years and you have nobody who is willing to stand up and say, oh, they were pretty fun to work with, and then the next person who walks in the door has 12 people who said, oh, great person to work with, you know, wonderful teammate, you know, amazing skills, whatever they say, that's a really strong signal. And obviously, when it comes down to the final decision, you're like, well, okay, you got a lot of recommendations from people in your indie game jam team. Is not quite the same thing as like Tim Sweeney, but it's still something, right? It's still a signal. And again, the thing we're always looking for is just like, is this somebody we want to work with, not is this a set of skills we want to purchase?
Joey, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you all nailed it. Yeah, I've seen a number of letters of recommendation in many applications, and oftentimes maybe it's a teacher or something, and the setting doesn't relate super well to what we're looking to do. When we've seen letters of rec that feel more like referrals from maybe an AD on Battlefield or something, if you can have that will make a big difference. If it's, you know, someone at sort of that hiring manager level, maybe the team knows and has a connection with, and then they've recommended you. So usually it won't make a difference, but there are some situations that I've seen the team, hey, I know this person recommended them, let's track that down. So I wouldn't bank on it and spend a ton of time in it, but it can help in some situations, but usually it's the networking aspect, I think, that we're gonna look at most likely.
I want to touch on something that Matt also said earlier about demonstrating things in your interview. Like, can you demonstrate that you are able to solve these problems, that you are able to do like these multiple things? Amy, do you want to touch?
Yeah, I can touch on that. Yeah, I think having like examples from an interview process. So, you know, every place is gonna have a little bit different of an interview process. I know that can be scary. And also like, I prepared for this, but it was something different, right? Hopefully you have a recruiter who's gonna help you through that process, right? On who's involved in your interview process, who are you talking with? I think having, most of the time when we're working together, hiring managers and recruiters, we're building out an interview plan and a process of who we want you to talk to, and we're gonna prepare those interviewers with questions that we want you to cover in the interview process. So I think a way to kind of utilize that is think about who you're talking with. So when you get the names of the people, go, okay, what do they do at the company? How is that gonna tie to the job that I'm applying to? How does that role interact with my role? So then you can kind of start to think about and build out questions from there to prepare for that. Another good way is looking at your job description and then your level of experience and go, okay, here's some of the requirements of the job. They'll probably ask me questions related to that. How can I build out answers to those with the level of experience or the projects that I've worked on, and then build that from there. So that's just some ways that I normally tell folks to kind of start thinking about that.
Sorry.
I have a quick question. Thank you. Thank you very much. Kind of going to the first question that you had about where you're looking. And kind of looking at our crowd here, it seems like most everybody are students, and I remember when I was that age, I may have worked at, you know, a coffee shop or something. I've never gone through a corporate interview process. And back in my day, you'd send in your resume to 500 different places, and hope that it got through the recruiters to the hiring managers who are going to make a decision on me. Can you kind of just go through the basics of explaining when I send my resume in and it gets filtered through, I guess now the new AI process, and hopefully it gets to a recruiter, all the way through to walking in the job.
So you actually touched on several things, and so the question is, for our recording, their question is, like, how does that process work once you send a resume in as well? And I also want to touch on, so whoever answers this, I just want to mention, Amy, you mentioned something very interesting there that I think goes right into this question, and that is, like, the recruiter is there to help you, right? I can almost guarantee you that 90% of the people on the internet think that the recruiter is using AI to filter people out, right?
I look at every resume just so everyone knows.
Exactly.
I know I should say that in the microphone.
I look at every resume.
Yes. Me too. Thousands of resumes.
So could I ask though, for how long? That's a good number for everybody to know. For how long do you look at the resume?
Oh, that's the great question.
There's a good one.
That is the good one. Joey's got it.
It depends on the role, but anywhere from 10 seconds to 30 seconds. And really usually no more than that. If it's got the portfolio that looks great, if it's got the, what we're looking for, we'll usually jump on it. And to Timmy's point, we do look at every single resume. I've heard about this amazing AI tool that will filter us candidates and bring us the best ones.
The Workday AI, right? The
We're
Workday AI.
not using it.
I don't know where it is. I'd love to find it, but I truly don't know anybody who's used it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I know this won't sound good to you guys, but that's not, the AI filters do exist. They're not quite as evil as you might think, because nobody reads the goddamn ads. And so I used to work right down the road here by the river over in those office buildings, and I was hiring for an artist, and it was supposed to be a senior role. And so the ad specifically said, 2 ship titles, 7+ years experience, which was hard, right? That was supposed to be a hard job to fill back in 2002 or whatever it was, right? I got easily 700 resumes for that job. And about 500 of them were from people who were either still in school or about to graduate from school, right? And by the end of the day, I would just walk out of there with an armful of like VHS tapes because it was 2001. And I just, God damn it. If anybody had offered me the AI tool to get rid of those instantly, I would have jumped on it in a heartbeat. So remember that other people can spam, and the people who are spamming, the guy in Kazakhstan who really wants a visa and is just sending things out, right? He's in that stream with you. And so the filters are a win-lose proposition. I don't want to defend them because they make a lot of stupid mistakes, but they are there for a reason, and it's good to remember that. So.
I do want to add too, because this may be slightly off topic, but I look at jobs online all the time, right? And it's kind of my job. And I always see 100+ applicants. It's been posted for 30 minutes, and that is very discouraging. I hope that I can tell you, please don't let it discourage you. Please apply, because Madden and I can both attest to, like you mentioned, Steve, out of the 100 applicants, maybe 2 to 5 of them actually are people who have experience or are in the right space and we want to look at them, whether it's a junior role, especially if it's a junior role, all the way up to senior. So didn't really answer the question, but I think it's really key to, as you're applying for work, if you see 100+, get it in there, right? Shoot your shot. Yeah, Michael Scott.
So can you guys,
Eric, you got a question?
Can you guys go ahead and answer the questions, like what happens once the resume goes in?
Sure, yeah. A lot happens. The first thing I think that we're going to do is we look at it, right? So we'll spend not a significant amount of time, but we'll usually build a list out of the internal applicant or the applicants we've seen and say, we've got 15 to 30 really great apps right here we want to look at. And maybe off the bat we know, okay, here's the top couple. We'll reach out to them and want to chat with them. Oftentimes we'll lean really heavily on the hiring manager who's looking to fill this role. I've spent countless hours with Eric staring at spreadsheets of applicants, of portfolios, and I still dream about that spreadsheet. So, you know, we definitely keep track of where you're at. You know, and so it doesn't go into a black hole, although sometimes and many times it may feel that way. There are humans on the other end looking at them, whether we're trying to, you know, we see that it's a great match for the role we have now, or oftentimes maybe there are some good recruiters out there who know we have another job coming up in the next, you know, 2 or 3 months that you might be a better fit for. And hopefully there is some level of dialogue there. I can't vouch for all the studios and whatnot, but there are a number of diligent recruiters who hopefully are making sure your resume is seen by the team and getting their input as well. We go through the whole hiring process to offer, but I don't think you want to hear necessarily about all that.
I was gonna say just time frame would be the other thing, so, because I think you were saying, okay, I applied to 50 jobs or something, and then I'm waiting to hear back from all of them, but I don't know where it's going, right? Know that recruiters are gonna get to that, but they might have multiple roles at the same time, so you might not hear back like exactly right away, because also in the process, Jay said, okay, he's got a list, now he's gonna work with the hiring manager, like he was saying, they had a spreadsheet that he was looking with Eric and going through, like, who do we wanna talk to first? So that could take a little bit to get the calibration to say, who do we wanna talk to first? Have the recruiter reach out, and then we're gonna start that screening process, or what we call a recruiter screen, as we're kind of the first area that you would talk with most of the time. And then from there, then it goes kind of to the hiring manager, et cetera. But it might not always be right away. So I just want you to be aware of that. Sometimes you might not hear back right away because they're still going through that calibration process, still reviewing or talking and screening candidates first, and then kind of going back through that process. So just be aware of that, because I feel like that's always something I see online with folks that always have a question. They're like, well, I haven't heard back yet. I'm like, it's been a week. Do you know how many applications we got this week? Okay, I've got to still go through them, right? Because there is somebody human on the other side going through and looking at those portfolios.
There's maybe one last point I want to make is that once it gets to the hiring manager, usually it filters either in a spreadsheet or a tool that we use, and they'll say, like, we've got a batch of 15 for you to take a look at, and there's a couple of check marks that say, like, follow up with a phone screen or pass. And I'll start going through the list, and I'll click on a website, and the first 2 won't work. You know, like they're going to professional websites, and I'm like, oh, pass. I don't dig any further than that. I'm just like, I can't. You know, I'm done with that. And so, what always surprises me is the percentage. That's a pretty consistent percentage of websites that don't work. So that's part of why we talk about ArtStation and some of the more reliable places that you can post your work, because a lot of times your particular website might crash on Chrome or whatever it is. So making sure that that's rock solid is, you might lose out on an opportunity just because of that. And so I wanted to make that point because I see it a lot.
Yeah, that is a really important one. So, like, you know, once a job or an applicant reaches a recruiter, right, it's also a little different over the lifespan of the opening, which makes it really interesting too. At the beginning, there's going to be this dance between the hiring manager and the recruiter as the nature of the position clarifies, right? Hopefully somebody spent a lot of time thinking about that job thing. Usually they don't. Actually, a lot of people just like do cookie cutter, cut and paste crap, but you're still trying to figure out, what do I want? And then you have to educate the recruiter on what you want, because they weren't in the room while you and your team were talking about what we want. And maybe what you want turns out to be unrealistic. So you see the first 100 resumes and you're like, wow, apparently nobody knows both Houdini and Cinema 4D or whatever the hell you're asking for, right? And so the first half of that funnel is a slow process, because we're like, well, we asked for this. Did we get anybody? Is it any good? And then you kind of adjust the funnel. You go sit down with the recruiter again. You say, well, maybe we'll be a little more lenient on this, a little less on that. Maybe, I've talked to 4 people in a row who came out of the VR industry, and they just don't get the thing that we need them to get. So we're not going to take any more VR resumes on this round, kind of thing. So that's why, like, the same job, 2 of you might apply for the same job 3 months apart. One of you might not hear back for 3 months, and the second person might hear back in a week. So you have to accept that there's a hidden lottery that you don't see, but it isn't because people are being jerks. It's just because there's a lot of information flowing through that pipeline back and forth and back and forth. And people are trying to understand what the audience, what the market out there is at this point in time. The same job advertised this year, last year, and 3 years ago would pull in different people because of market conditions. So we're constantly calibrating, and that's one of the reasons it's so slow.
Well, I also want to make sure everybody understands, Matt and Steve, what's your job? What do you do? Matt, what's your title?
World art director?
Okay. Steve, what's your title?
I'm currently a procedural tech art lead, but I've
Okay.
been technical art director and then sort of director of technical art. Which is
Yeah,
the same.
so that's what you guys do on a daily basis, like every day. And then occasionally it's like, oh yeah, now I have to go.
Now you've hired.
Now
Now he's hiring
Now
too.
I put the hat on as a hiring manager. But that's not the bulk of your time. So most of your time is spent not doing hiring manager stuff. Is that correct?
Yep.
That's true. And it's also, it's interesting because, yeah, you almost have to train yourself into it again, get into it, and then
Yeah.
it's the most critical thing that you can do, really,
Yeah.
is building that team. So, yeah, it's super important.
And I'll just mention in passing, right, just so you get a sense of the time scale, the last 3 roles I hired, these might not be entirely applicable for you guys because they were very senior roles, but each of those roles took 9+ months to fill because I'm super picky, right? But we have to be picky, right? Actually, people are too eager to hire you. It's not always a great sign because like it means they're kind of desperate for warm bodies. Picky hiring is the way to build a successful team over time, but it means you have to get comfortable with an empty chair and a deadline looming and all that stuff. So.
I was going to add one more thing there. We were talking about length of time, of how long it took you to fill a role. Just so you all are aware, there's a lot of different types of employment opportunities. So I think that's another thing that I think sometimes students or early in career don't always have visibility to because you're thinking, oh, I've got to get that full-time job. There's a lot of freelance, there's contract jobs through agencies that you can get hired out of. There's also temporary employment, which is like a fixed term employment, meaning you have a start date and an end date that you're gonna work on a project for like 6 months, 7 months, because that's the need that they have. Those are great opportunities to get like short-term experience to like build up to a full-time job as well. When I used to work at Blizzard, I worked for the cinematics department for hiring, and they hired over 100 temps per year on the projects because of how much volume they did from a cinematic standpoint of their output. So I would need to hire like 24 animators within a 3-month period. So like the turnaround time is completely different, right? So the speed of how quickly I would need to talk to people, go through applications because there was a project need and a date. Whereas others, they might not need someone, we call it button seat, of when we're specifically gonna hire somebody or they need to start on the project. That can be different. So I just want you to all know that there are different types of employment that you could also look at or consider.
Just real quick, I was just one thing we've been kind of giving this the big company perspective, right? Where there's a hiring manager who's separate from a recruiter, where there's a lot of you will probably get your first jobs at little tiny fly-by-night companies with 20 or fewer people, where the hiring manager, the CEO, and maybe the game director are all the same person. And that will be a great opportunity for an awful lot of folks. It's also going to be a lot less smooth because, many of these startups, they've only done this once or twice. It's 3 friends who started a company and now they're trying to scale it and they don't know how to do this. It takes a long time to get good at it. But don't turn your nose up at those because that's a really awesome opportunity to bypass some of the filters, which might be harder. Say you're somebody who doesn't have a 4-year college degree, right? And there are companies that just won't look at you, even though it's totally irrelevant to what we actually do for a living, right? Or say you are in an unusual age bracket, right? Nobody in here is in their 30s in art school, right? But say you did a couple of years in the military and you came back and you wanted to try this, you're much more likely to get a bite from a smaller company than you are from a company that sees 10,000 resumes a month, right? So that's a good thing to keep in mind as you think about your own strategy for making yourself visible.
I want to put a pin in that. We'll come back to that later as well.
They covered it.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Good job, team.
Yeah, go ahead. We got a mic.
Hey, Amy, what's your last name so I can find you on LinkedIn?
Madden like football or shoes, whichever you want to go. Madden like football, MADDEN, or like Steve Madden shoes, whichever one you want to go.
Okay, thank you.
Just her? Actually, no, you two both said your last names, but Joey, what's your last name?
Sopo, SOPO.
Thank you.
That doesn't track to any products, so.
It's okay, I didn't hold the mic the first time either, so here we go.
While we're making that, I actually want to touch on this. Typically, when someone is looking for a job, they're gonna think of, for in games, they're gonna think of Blizzard and you know, Epic and stuff like that. Steve, you had a great point of the smaller studios, because I think that's where a lot of people start. I started at a small studio, and yeah. So I want to get your take.
I'm
Yeah,
wearing one
Cat
right
Daddy's,
now.
yeah.
Yep.
So I'm going to get your take on looking at large studios versus looking at small studios. Like, can you guys just talk about that a little bit? Like, and I'm talking specifically about looking at finding job openings at those studios.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, maybe the most obvious great thing about small studios is they are feeling more pressure. But when they put up a job, they're feeling more pressure to fill it. Again, you know, if you like the last place where I could afford to sit around and like wait 9 months, right? There's 600 people on that project. The company before that was 7,000. So it was pretty easy to sit it out if I wasn't comfortable. But I'm trying to make my Xbox Live debut in 9 months. I can't afford to hang around and like wait for the perfect person to walk through, right? So they have a little bit more motivation. And the other thing is, because a lot of people do just default to going to the names they grew up with, they go to Nintendo, they go to the Pokemon company, they go to Microsoft, whatever, you're relatively smaller competitive group going to apply for these small games. And so you can get out of that zero experience trap, right? The difference between no games and one game is effectively infinity, right? Whereas the difference between like 5 games and 6 games hardly matters on your resume. And so that is a really good thing. Getting something where somebody paid you to work on their game puts you already into the minority of people who are hoping to get into the field. And so that's what I love. That's what I love about it. And usually it's what I tell students is the first place to look.
There's like a couple different things that you can look up online too that are available. I don't know how much Game Dev Map is updated anymore, but that's a great resource because you can search by location. So let's say you're in Washington, you can look up and go, what studios are in Washington State? And then you'll get a list. Which locations have the most amount of studios? So if I move to Texas, because there's a bunch of gaming studios there, what are the other ones that I could work for or build relationships with, or a networking event that's going on in that area because there's a bunch of studios there. Another one is like Hitmarker. Is that what it's called? Hitmarker? Right? Hitmarker is like a really good one on LinkedIn that you can look up, and they do a lot of postings for a lot of early career jobs. I know you're shaking your head, so I got it right. So that's another good option that you can look on LinkedIn to like find, you know, what studios or some of those, and those are places that do like more of some of their smaller indies, or they're not advertising openings on LinkedIn because maybe they don't want to spend that money, or they don't have that additional money to spend that, or they don't have a recruiter. So they'll use those other services to kind of help out with that. They can find some of those smaller studios.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was just going to say that, just in general, getting your foot in the door is a huge thing at this point in your career. And a lot of game companies, the smaller game companies, are trying to find talent without, it sounds terrible, but without spending a tremendous amount of money to get it. So they're hoping to like get the good draft pick where they're like, I found this amazing person before the whole rest of the world knew that they were great. And so it gives you an opportunity to get in, get that experience, build your network, all the things that we've been talking about. Any experience in that regard is a good experience. And yeah, I would definitely recommend that you look in all places.
Yeah, I also want to emphasize that large studios, you are going to be one applicant of 800. Small studios, you're going to be one applicant of 20. something like that, your percentage of getting a job at a small studio is just way better if you look at it. So.
I think I should probably add, just in the interest of fairness, that like the flip side of this is the likelihood that that small studio survives long enough to ship your game is a thing, right? This is a real thing. I've known people who've gone from place to place to place. That's part of the equation, is the chaos factor, the kind of like maybe nobody will ever hear of your like how to teach kids how to do math on an iPhone game or whatever. It's still a good trade-off if you're especially in that zero ship titles category, right?
Yeah,
So-
it is a job in the industry, like you said, someone paid you to do that. So boom, that's one on your. Go ahead.
Hi, you guys, or I guess on the recruiter side, you guys mentioned, you go through a bunch of resumes, you look at them for maybe 10 seconds, and on the hiring manager side, you're clicking on links and looking at portfolios, and you're probably only looking for a little bit, but the link doesn't work, you just skip over it. What are some things that can get us those 30 seconds of reviewing the resume, or really make you want to click in and look at the portfolio deeper? Is there things that people kind of miss, or things that people should be including that maybe not everyone does?
Yeah, I mean, there's.
I'm just gonna repeat the question so we can pick it up on the mics here. So essentially, because you're spending so little time on each of those applicants, what makes you stand out?
Yeah, this is, I think, a really good question and kind of at the crux. There's a few different things. I'll talk about one of the ones that I value a lot, that I see sporadically, which is I like to see how you think. We talked about this earlier, but we're not just evaluating your portfolio, but we're evaluating how you make decisions, how you approach the problem, that kind of thing. And so I really enjoy if you have your portfolio and then you've got this whole here's my breakdown, here's how I approach the problem, here's my UV sets, here's blah, 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 all that type of thing. That gives me a huge leg up, because a lot of times you'll get a portfolio and you're like, yeah, this is good, but maybe they did the leaf in this entire, it's really hard to tell without you giving me that data. And if I can see that data, so that is huge. I guess I'll back up a little bit, that I'm also looking for unique, you know what I mean? Something that stands out a little bit. So what I mean by that is we see a lot of guns, we see a lot of hallways, you know what I mean? We're looking for something like, what is it that you have done creatively that is interesting, that is different, that is not the same type of hallway over and over again. And I should send it out. There's this really great image that we have that we put together at Turn 10 a while ago that showed 3 different sci-fi hallways. And it shows the generic one, and then a good one, and then one where it's obviously wow, they did some really creative things here. And that one will grab your eye. So if you do something that's really unique and really exceptional in terms of how you solved it creatively, and then I go through and I see all that detail about how you thought about the problem, I'm like, oh man, this is amazing. And that's what I'm looking for, is standing out in that unique way, and then doing the homework.
Yeah, I mean, I just would plus one everything Matt said. I think it's the story is what you're selling, not the finished product, right? Here is the problem I was set. We had to do this thing, and we could only do it in 7 milliseconds. We had to do this thing, but we were not allowed to use baked lighting, so we had to do this instead. And then we did that, and then it turned out that whatever it is, right? The story is a lot of what you're selling, because that's what professionals care about almost as much as the finished beauty stuff, right? And then I'll just add one other thing, because I see some hands. One other thing. Read the ad. Read the job ad. Tailor the resume and the work that you are proffering so that it looks like the job ad. Because if it's a job working on a fantasy RPG and you send them a lot of shots of beautiful car renderings, you're not going to make it past second 3, right? And so if you'd be great at this, but it's not in your wheelhouse, include a story about why you would be great about this, but it's not in your wheelhouse. The poor, sad cover letter is not just a relic of the 19th century. It is there to let you beg for an exemption, right? And to show that you're capable of articulating why you know what the problem is and you can solve it.
I want to dig into this a little bit more, and I want to actually ask, what do you not want to see? What are the mistakes that put you off, that you don't even spend 2 seconds on something? Because I think what you're describing there is, okay, I've stopped and I've looked at it, now I'm scrolling through it. That's more than the 5 seconds. What turns you off to keep you from looking at it for more than 5 seconds?
Bad taste.
Yeah.
Right? Number one thing is people are nervous about not having enough material. But I would rather see 3 excellent things than 3 excellent things and 5 mediocre things and 2 terrible things.
Yeah, I can't plus that one hard enough. Yeah, I often tell students that if they've got, you can kind of tell that you're like, there's way too many pieces here. Just go to all your friends, say, what are my top 3 pieces? What are my worst pieces, right? And if consistently you get a number of people telling you the worst pieces, call those out and run that exercise a bunch of times until you've got what you feel are the strongest representatives of you. Volume does you no good. In fact, we will judge you by your worst piece. So we'll take a look at it and we'll go like, they put all these pieces in here, but this one here says just as much about you as all these others, the worst piece that you have. So be really mindful of that when you're putting that together.
I'm gonna ask an obvious question here. What about if you get a broken link? Does that turn you off? What do you do, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned it before. I just stop.
Yes.
Yeah, if I go to a broken link and it's not there, you're like, oh, I mean, that's enough.
I don't have time to
Yeah.
track it down.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different if a lot of times, like if you get a resume that is not coming from the sort of traditional games industry halls of power, I might spend an extra 10 minutes, 5 minutes trying to figure out if I can see it. Whereas if it's, just a kind of straight down the middle of the thing and it doesn't work out of the box, then yeah, I'll skip it.
Yeah, I'm way lazier than that. I just
Go ahead.
It's similar to broken links, passwords on portfolios.
Yeah.
You can put them on there, but if it's not right next to the link on your resume, I'm not going to hunt for it. Dozens and dozens. A lot of senior candidates will do that because maybe they're posting something that they don't want the public to see. And I can't go and email everybody and say, your password didn't work, didn't show up. Don't have any invisible spaces or dashes afterwards because I'm just going to double click and copy it. If it grabs a blank space because you tabbed past it or something, you're screwing yourself, unfortunately. Take the passwords off unless it really, really needs to be there.
I was gonna add one more. I know you all have been covering portfolio with that question. I want to cover resume with that because I think that's also as important.
Yep.
Joey and I see so many resumes per day, so I think we're pretty good at spotting decent resumes. I get some where folks are in a creative role, so they give me a very creative resume that I can't read. I don't understand what the qualifications are. Great, it's a cool design, but it doesn't tell me what you did at your job. So make sure your resume is legible. There's a lot of great resources. I always suggest to people actually going on Etsy and downloading a version so you have a cover letter template, a resume template. Think about what you want the design to look like based off of your level of experience, but it's a great option so then you have it already formatted and you're not building it out in Word by yourself. You can have a great formatted resume that's very clear for the recruiter. Remember, you have a very short window of time for us to scrub through the resume and then also look at your portfolio. So I want people to know that that is just as important as your portfolio too. So.
And there's a non-zero chance that your resume will not, the file you send is not the file that the person reading it sees. It may get ingested into a corporate system and then re-spat out as something else. And so if you've got a crazy background color or a font that wasn't available on somebody's ATS system or whatever the hell, they may just get gibberish. So keep it simple.
Yeah, PDF.
Last easy one for cover letters. I do read cover letters, and I can't tell you how many of them have said, I can't wait to come and work at different game studio that I'm working at. And if you've got a great background, I'll probably still reach out to you, but it is the attention to detail. It's a really easy mistake. I would probably make it myself, but you got double, triple check because shows.
There was, there's one last thing about portfolio, besides broken links, is if you're not using ArtStation or one of the standard ones and you create a portfolio, you create your own website now becomes a portfolio piece. And so I know a lot of people that are just like, I just put a website up to put my portfolio stuff on it. And we are also, right or wrong, judging you against how you put together that portfolio. So just know that it becomes just as much a part of your portfolio as everything else that you put on it. So be careful with that.
I would also say that having your own site puts you at greater risk, because what if it's down? What if it doesn't load right? Anything else? You put it on ArtStation, that's going to be up.
Yeah.
That's going to always be there, and you're not going to worry about it. Matt, what was the next one?
And yeah,
Since we're talking about cover letters, are they important? Like, how can you use a cover letter to work in your favor?
Are cover letters important? How can you use a cover letter in your favor?
I can talk to that a little bit. I like to think of the cover letter as a way to answer any questions that somebody might have after looking at your resume. Maybe you were out of the workforce for a few years. Whether for good or bad, people might judge you for that. Use the cover letter to poke at some of that. Maybe your background is a great fit for the role. I think one of you guys said it earlier. Use it as the opportunity. I think it's like the beggar said something like not like that, but if you're thinking, hey, I might not directly line up with this job description, but I know I'm a great fit, the cover letter is a really great opportunity. It doesn't necessarily prove that, but to try to dispel questions that somebody might have when they look at your resume at a first glance. So that's how I like to use it. When I was applying to work in games for the first time, didn't have any games experience, but the 2,000 hours I had on XYZ game that I wanted to come work at that studio, I think that said something. And so talking about that, like, show your passion, show your interest. Maybe you don't have experience, but you are a plat 2 or something on the game, talk about that. It's crazy because we work in an industry where hiring managers are impressed by that sort of stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen in accounting.
Yeah, it's not a button up kind of studio you're applying to. We want to see who you are and your passions. So answer questions, show your passions. That's what I would use it for.
Yeah, it's a little more human than the rest of it. And then you get into the interesting job hunter's dilemma of how much of my real humanity do I want to share, right? Which is a real question, because if you come off like a complete corporate robot, you're going to fade into the background. If you do, as somebody once sent me a cover letter that included a lot of discussion of his advocacy on behalf of legalizing heroin, and it happens, right? So. You may not want to be quite that honest about who you are, but it is a great opportunity to set the tone for that very brief interaction you're going to have with somebody, your portfolio and your resume.
Yeah, it's another, again, we're trying to learn as much about you as we can from a very small amount of information, so it's just another pool of information that we can pull from. We can usually tell if it's AI written, which really turns me off, so if it does look like it's written by a robot, I kind of hate that. But if it is genuine and you're like, oh, this person sounds nice and I could probably work with them, it's just one more hook. Yeah, and if you're, just say you're applying for Battlefield and you're like, I've driven tanks for 5 years, you're like, well, that's a nice piece of information that could come in handy, if you have things like that, then by all means share.
Yeah, I actually want to touch on that because one of the things that I use when I look at cover letters, if you apply for a job on Destiny and you are a level, whatever it is, Titan that's been playing for 20 years, not 20 years, it's been out that long. That is a big boost because now I know I don't have to teach you, oh, this is what a Titan is, this is what a Warlock is, this is what a Hunter. I don't have to teach you any of that. You're going to be teaching me the names of all of those things that all they are. So that is a huge place, like you said, Joey. That's a huge place that can be a bonus. So that's an excellent reason for cover letters.
Hi, I had a mentor recently who was very insistent on the concept of you're an artist, your resume has to portray that you're an artist, put something creative in the structure of your resume. Is there merits to that? Do hiring managers and recruiters actually care if your resume looks pretty, or is it just convey the information and then let the portfolio speak.
So the question is, as an artist, do you need to have your resume appear as an artist? Does it have to be creative?
You can,
I
go ahead.
probably both say the same thing. No, I don't think it has to be to the degree maybe it sounds like it's being conveyed to you. It needs to look good. It needs to be readable. Wall of text just isn't something that we'd like to look at naturally. So do we need to have beautiful 3D models and things on that? I would avoid that. Oftentimes it can actually cause issues with uploading a resume or something. Just it might not parse correctly. So I would avoid icons, pictures, definitely not headshots, things like that. But it does need to look good to the layman, right? I'm not an artist, but I do know what generally looks good. So yeah, I would recommend to some degree think about that. But
Legible first, tasteful, yes, second. And then if you want to be a little classy about it, right? Pay attention to the language, pay attention to, just like the overall read of the page and whatever. But trying to make it an art piece is a very high risk, high reward thing. It will catch eyes, but many times it's going to, not the catch you want. So
I see it more in animation. I like visual effects, some visual effects, and then also like animation studios, like a Nickelodeon. Like if they're working, like storyboard artists will do this a lot, where they'll have one of their storyboard characters like at the bottom of the resume, and then it like matches coloring with options that they pick. But it's still very much, here's the job, here's the title, here's the studio that I worked at, and here's what I did in the job. But they might have something like that to be a little creative. Like I would consider, yes, that's a creative element on a resume, but it's not making this crazy circle with all these different things on it with multiple different colors. Like they had mentioned that it's not going to be read in an ATS, and I can't read it. If you have something, you only have us for 10 to 20 seconds. So, right, you need it still to be able to be legible for us to see it. So I think you can add some creative flair to it, depending on the studio or company that you're going for. But I see it more in animation than I do in games. And when I worked at DreamWorks for about 3 years, and then I was at Lucasfilm, and so I would say I saw that a lot more there.
As an artist, what if it looks bad? What if your resume looks bad?
It's the same thing as the website. It's just another thing for us to judge you against. So I would actually argue I would prefer it that it's just clean and legible and that kind of thing. I generally won't judge that. What I'll judge is if it looks bad. So if it's messy or lines are put together or you misspelled a bunch of stuff, I'll be like, man, this person did not put in the effort. That's where I think it'll get you. But the other stuff I generally don't look at that, to be honest.
The bell curve of possible resume outcomes is not centered on 0. It's centered on like -5. And so like there are way more ways to make it go bad than there are to really win. So it's better to play it safe.
Yeah.
Matt.
I thank you for the clarification around portfolio pieces. That's like, you really only need 3 good ones and that's it, or great ones and that's it. I had a question around like your resume and the projects on it though. So like if I have, or if a student has 3 great pieces on their portfolio, but does it still make sense for them to make sure that their resume is like chock full of like, oh, I did this game jam and I did this my freshman year, my sophomore year. Like, is it okay to have more projects on your resume comparatively to the very curated portfolio?
Yes. So the question is, how much of the content do you need on your resume versus how does that compare to how many pieces are in your portfolio? Like, is there a relationship between how many things you have in your portfolio, how many things you have on your resume, how detailed you get in your resume?
I think for me, I think it's fine to include a number of projects, especially if they show you had initiative and maybe you were, working in team projects or you work with indie game, like showing that you have that experience is good. What bugs me is when you fill the resume with things that aren't relevant to the job. So if you just show like, I worked at a copy shop for 2 years, like it starts to get to a point where you're like, no, this isn't relevant to me. So I'd avoid that type of thing. Yeah.
The reality is if you're coming out of school and this is going to be your first job in the industry, you have a one-pager, and trying to pad it is going to be obvious, right? There is, however, a really nice end run you can do. LinkedIn has a lesser attended feature where you can list projects there. And not only that, those projects can be cross-referenced against the skills in the LinkedIn database. And so like if you worked on 3 Game Jam projects, right, you include all of those projects and then you make sure to cross-reference them. Oh, and this one I was a modeler, and this one I used, procedural generation, whatever. And then the robots that scan LinkedIn looking for stuff like this that might help you connect to a recruiter someday see a positive hit for a project that had that skill attached to it. And so it doesn't get you into that like fighting for attention, instant recognition thing in the resume space, but it does get it out there for the world to see.
I like seeing, like, if you have, the projects, if you list out some, don't make the whole entire page just the projects, but think about what are your top projects, or maybe the ones that you want to highlight. If those correlate, that's great, because that could be a talking point for the hiring manager and the recruiter that they can reference back to. As far as, like, other experience where you mentioned, like, coffee shop, or maybe you were a project manager for something, or you worked in an office and you want to go into production. There's some skill sets that cross over to that. So you can always list on your resume like other experience or other work experience and have that in a different section. So you can list some of that, but I wouldn't make that the whole entire thing on your resume, but you could have that in there as well, because there might be some soft skills or other skills that you learn of working with a team or other people in an office that would help out. And those are those other skill sets outside of just the main ones that were required for the job.
Does a leader at a job outside of the games industry help? Like if you list that you were a leader at some point?
Yeah, I would say it does. Yeah, I mean, it shows initiative and it shows that you can work with a team, and there's a number of things that does show. So yeah. Matt.
I was curious if subscriptions, like premium subscriptions, are worth it for getting noticed, like Premium LinkedIn or ArtStation Pro?
Premium LinkedIn or ArtStation Pro? What are your thoughts? Are they worth it?
Message, use a number of message, if you needed to message that much.
Probably not. I wouldn't spend the money on it personally. Some LinkedIn features allow you to maybe send more messages or something, but is that going to be the thing that helps when you're doing cold outreach? I think that comes back to the networking and whatnot we were talking about earlier being more important. I think those sites can be really predatory, just trying to suck money out of you for no reason. Now, I, as a recruiter, I love spending the money on it. I love having my company spend the money on it because it allows me to go do that. I don't expect job seekers, especially not early recruiter ones, to be spending. I think they're fairly expensive. I wouldn't do it.
I think there's also, you also, when you connect with someone, right? So you're all gonna connect with me on LinkedIn, like we did our homework, remember? Okay, just saying. You have a certain number of words that you can do when you're connecting with me to send me a message. It gives you the option, just connect with me without sending a message, or connect with me and write me a message. I would love to see some messages from you all that, hey, Amy, we met you at the DigiPen event today. It was great, or etc. So you can actually use that as kind of part of your message without paying for something like a LinkedIn Premium or anything like that. And that is a free option that you can just do. So I think that's a great avenue. I know a lot of people that use that don't have a LinkedIn Premium account.
And it's particularly nice, it's also like if you meet somebody at GDC or a Game Jam or something like that, because you're going to be in there with a zillion other people in their LinkedIn, right? And they'll vaguely remember you if you're lucky, but if you wrote that down that's the first thing that stays in the message thread. And then if you reach out to them 3 years later, you're like, remember we met at that thing. It's a lot more natural than if it's just like, I got people on 6 continents and I just I have no idea who 99% of them are, right? So we had a hand down here.
Yeah, let's do this one here real quick.
You mentioned that quality over quantity is very important in resumes, but you also mentioned that you really like a depth of information, and I'm not really sure how to reconcile those two things.
I think it's so. Somebody mentioned, have 3 portfolio pieces and keep it to that. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we like to see. So if you have a breadth of 15 amazing things and they're all fantastic and they represent you really well, that's fine too. That actually does present us more information. But just know that if you have 13 great things and 2 terrible ones, we'll be looking at those terrible ones. So it doesn't hurt to have more in there, as long as you're confident that those things represent you well and are of high quality. You know what I mean? So we'll take all the information we can get. You just want to make sure what you're giving us is the right data, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
I'd like to add something to that too. When you're looking at like the depth of each piece, right? Oftentimes, like maybe we'll be hiring an effects artist, and it's just the effect, and it's beautiful, great. Like that's at a minimum what we want to see. But the thing that takes it really to the next level is somebody who's gone further and they have the particle system that they built, and it's beautifully labeled, and it's clear what they've done. Maybe they have some concept art that they then, maybe 2D art or something that they did to initially block it out, and they put that sort of underneath to kind of show their process of what this final piece was. That is like the most beautiful thing that I'll ever see in a portfolio. So, it's sort of the how you got there. Obviously, you want it's got to look good and don't include like a messy particle system or something that's not well done. But if you really button all that up and you present it as a whole package versus just the final piece, make sure it's still one clickable thing that you're getting into, and then it has all of that. But every hiring manager I think I've ever worked with just goes nuts for that. They love to see behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah. Well, and a big thing now, especially, is that that sort of like, here's a pretty picture doesn't have the impact it used to, because if that pretty picture is like an Unreal asset flip, it's like, well, your pretty picture and the next person's pretty picture might be almost identical, and so. Whereas here's a pretty picture, here's a wireframe of the same scene, and here's the stuff that I did, and here's the stuff that I got off the asset store, and here's what I did to change it, and here's what the assignment was, all of that stuff. It doesn't have to be right in your face, but when we say 3 or 4 pieces, that doesn't necessarily mean 3 or 4 pictures, right? That can be essentially 3 or 4 kind of like, you might want to use the pictures as your cover, but if somebody clicks on it, then they take it to the explanation of what the assignment was, what the constraints were, what the problems you solved were, what parts are yours and what part belong to the rest of the team. That's actually a really important part. Like if something comes in, especially from a very junior person, and it looks really, really good and there's no attribution, I get suspicious. So, whereas, because like I've definitely had people submit, stuff they bought off of like TurboSquid or whatever, as if it were their own work. Rest assured that there's a really good chance that, especially for single models and stuff like that, you might very well get tin-eyed. So you don't even try it. That is a black mark that'll follow you around. So,
Matt, I want to touch on something that you said. Let's say you have 8 pieces in your portfolio, 6 of them are good and 2 of them are bad. You said you're primarily going to judge them on the bad ones. And I don't disagree with that, because if you are willing to put, and tell me if this is the way you're thinking as well, if you are willing to put out for yourself a piece that is not artistically good, that is not a good piece, can I trust you to put the highest quality out of my studio when I hire you, right? Is that?
Yeah, it's an indicator of kind of it. You mentioned it before, your taste and your judgment, right? And so we're saying like, I either they didn't know, or the taste isn't there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we start to judge that.
And so
Right
also,
or wrong.
Yeah. So would you say almost, and Steve is a tech artist, this might be like the more pieces you have in your portfolio, the greater the chances you're gonna have that bad one or the like. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think the more you have, the more we'll sort of see the real range of who you are, right? And so you might not want to show that to the right? Like you really want to show the best of yourself. I mean, it's natural for all of us, and so that's where I'd really lean on your peers, lean on as many people as you know. Are these great? Sometimes you can't always judge, so just ask a lot of people. Are these the best representations of me?
your portfolio is also an ever-changing thing, just like your resume is. As you gain more experience, as you work on additional projects, right? You just worked on something, you put it in your portfolio, and now you've got another project, and maybe that project outshines that other one that you just did. You're gonna go back and edit it. It's forever a changing thing as you continue to gain more experience in the industry. I have saved like all of my resumes from way back when I started as an intern, like did an internship and everything, and I can't even look at those resumes anymore. You don't even want to know. So that's going to be the same for your portfolio. Like just know that it's going to change, and that's okay. And you're constantly going to edit and adjust.
Yeah, it's kind of been implied in a lot of things that we've been saying all night, but in case it hasn't been obvious, let's make it obvious. You tailor the resume and the portfolio that you send to any particular company so that it reflects the things that they're talking about, right? You might have 8 good pieces, but 4 of them are animation and 4 of them are modeling. And if you're applying for a modeling job, maybe you include 1 animation just to say I'm super versatile, but you don't make them sit through a 30 or 40-second animation reel for a modeling job, right? So you got to think about that stuff.
Yeah, that's big.
Would you, and I'm glad you said that because that was actually the question I was going to ask. So let's say, for example, you've done animation, you've done modeling, you've done texture painting and things like that. What I would suggest, and you tell me if you agree with this, what I would suggest is you create on your portfolio site, you create links for each of those individual things so that when you apply for that modeling job, you send them the link to your modeling page. Then they get interested, and then they're like, oh, by the way, this guy also does texturing. Oh, and he also does animation. Is that probably the best way to do it?
Exactly. You want that first initial bite to go down really easy. The person who's like seriously thinking about bringing you in will be glad that you have the additional information, but they're not your real problem when you're setting it up. The real problem is getting the bite at all, right? Get that hook set first, and then you can worry about pulling the fish out. So
yeah. Okay, great.
Hi, my name is Alice. Thank you guys so much for presenting today. My question is regarding the weight of portfolio pieces versus reels. So I know like having technical breakdowns, it's hard to have that for multiple pieces in like a 60-second reel. Are you guys typically looking directly at the portfolio first and then having a reel as a plus? Or is it you look at the reel first and then the portfolio?
So the question is, reel versus portfolio, which one is better? What weight do you put on either one? How do you do that?
I'm not sure that there's a hard distinction all the time. If you're in the motion field, like if you're doing animation, you're doing FX, even if it's cinematography, right, then there's a really good chance that the only way to really sell your work is to show it in motion. The one thing that I'd be very careful about is the long, overproduced cinematic trailer with a lot of music and careful editing. I mean, it's great if you want to do that, but don't make that the price of entry. Because again, right, people are working, the first person who looks at your thing is going to be in there in a frame of mind, which is, I have less than a minute to spend on this. So if I got to sit there through the long, slow buildup of the black screen while the cinematic music swells before you cut to the dramatic reveal, right, that's longer than I probably looked at somebody else's resume for. So, like an animator might send either, gray renders or sketches. They might show the whole thing, but that'll be broken up into pieces, so bite-sized pieces, instead of a beautiful show reel like you might see if you're going to look at the side effects booth at SIGGRAPH or something.
Yeah, I mean, you might judge me for this, but if I see like a 7-minute reel, I'm like, oh man.
you just click through it, right?
Yeah, you're just like,
click,
dot.
click.
Yeah, all right, yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's the game industry, we click through cinematics.
Yeah, you can reference like your shot list too. Like a lot of times I'll like look at somebody's shot list, and that will help me with additional information if I want to like do a click through really fast. I'm like, oh, I just want to go to, let's say for animation, they might have worked on Avatar or something, and I see an animator's thing, I'll click through and I'll be like, okay, I want to go to their Avatar shots because that coincides mostly with what I was hiring, right? That I know that was going to be relevant, and I saw on their shot list, they worked on that. So I'll then just go to that in their, on their reel. But I would say it depends on a discipline. A lot of the times, I would say most of the time I see like, animators have some type of animation reel, right, that they're specifically wanting to look at. For storyboarding, that would vary. Sometimes I'll see just their storyboard, like individual shots for TV, that's more common. And then for like cinematic animation, they want like a full shot list with everything in there. And I normally will have like a games one or a cinematics one, or some will have dialogue depending on if that animation is for dialogue or not. So it would vary on the discipline.
Just a real quick anecdote here. I have a friend who is an animation lead at Valve. He worked on Nightmare Before Christmas, James and the Giant Peach. I sat at lunch with him one day and I said, God, I hate it when I'm looking through visual effects portfolios and they have this big long reel that I have to watch and pick through. I'd rather just, hey, I want to click on that thing, see what it looks like. I want to click on that thing. And he's like, you are insane. That's the best way to do it. So to Amy's point, it depends on the discipline and it depends on the person.
Yep.
So what I suggest is do both. Like you have your pieces up there, and then there's also, hey, by the way, if you want to look at it and you have the time, here's my reel.
And just an aside, I was thinking about this because when you're in one of the assembling disciplines, like say you're an environment artist or you're a cinematographer, something like that, right? Where a great deal of what's on screen is not something you made with your own hands. It's really, really important to give credit. So like if somebody shows me a really awesome cinematography shot of somebody else's animation and they don't credit the animator, I'm already like, they've lost a lot of points in my book, right? Because part of what's selling it on the emotional level is the animation, not as much the cinematography. And so at least give your colleagues, the people on your student teams, whatever, the credit, right? But it also is part of that whole thing of like, if I can trust you to show your work, then I will go into it with an open mind. And if I start to worry that maybe I'm seeing that you just moved the camera around and you bought an animation off of Mixamo or whatever, then it's like, it's a different thing, right? If it's a Mixamo animation because you're showing something else and you're like, this is a Mixamo animation, I'm cool with it, right? But that's where you have to draw the line, is make sure that people are really clear what you're claiming credit for.
Just gonna say, like, you're in such an amazing time right now where online you can look at so many people's portfolios, just you as like an individual. Like I remember trying to do storyboarding and everybody had them like printed out, and you would have a sheet, you'd have a huge portfolio and it would be of all your storyboard, like some of your shots and everything. And like now you can just look it up on ArtStation. So like you're like, okay, I know I want to work at Turn 10 or I want to go work at, you know, X studio. Let me look up the artists that are at those studios. Let me look at their actual like ArtStation page. What does their portfolio look like? What are they showing? You have this great like reference point that you're able to utilize right now to also like have that visual for yourself as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And build the habit early of keeping your portfolio updated all the time.
I'm so bad at that.
You don't want to like, you don't want to wait till the layoff notice arrives in your email to start frantically assembling your.
100%. Go ahead.
So I've heard a lot that a really good way to start like tailoring your portfolio to specific jobs is to do like style studies and stuff of whatever place you're trying to apply to, like match your style to where you're trying to go. To that extent, my question is, how do you all feel about like fan works? Like what's the line between what becomes fan art and is not acceptable and what is considered like a study of the way that this company does their stuff?
So the question is, we know that you want to tailor your portfolio and things like that to the places that you want to work. But what about fan art? Does that like cross the line? Do you feel weird about that or what?
I have one. I know you're thinking. I have one.
Yeah, go ahead, Amy. Yeah.
So I experienced this all the time when I was at Blizzard, because we would used to hold this big BlizzCon conference, and so we would do, for 3 days straight, we would do portfolio reviews, and we would have recruiters every 4 hours, like rolling through and looking at portfolios, and people would bring in like napkin sketches of like their favorite Overwatch character, other things. I saw like the gamut, right? And so there is fan art. What I would recommend, like usually what I've seen, because a lot of times I would see it for concept art or visual development a lot of the time, I would say instead of drawing like the Tracer character in Overwatch, right? What would Tracer's like half-sister look like? Or right in that style of the game, right? Or what would another character look like in that game that was in that same environment? instead of just doing a fan art of that exact character. A study like the game's character design, what that looks like, the shoulders, the armor that's on the clothes, right? And then make another character in that style, right? That would be, I would say, taking like a little bit of the fan art and copying a style, but then applying it to the game, right? Versus just drawing Tracer again, that we already have artists that are on the team that have drawn Tracer.
And I want to touch on that real quick. Like when someone gets hired, that literally what you're saying right there, Amy, might be the thing that you're asked to do. Mm-hmm. So if you are familiar enough with that style to translate that style into something that's related to it, that goes a long way, right?
And this actually comes back to the thing we were talking about before with the cover letter and the accompanying story, right? Because there's you've walked through Artist Alley at Comic-Con or whatever, right? And there's a fine line between homage and cringe. And like if you get in there and you're like, I thought since I was applying for a job at your company, I did this because I thought I really love this character anyway, and I thought it was a great chance to show you my skills. That comes off pretty cool. But like, if you come off as a sort of obsessive fan, that may actually be off-putting. It's a little subjective too. Some teams are extremely proud of what they've created and they love it when people come to that. That's flattery, and others are like, oh, they don't get it at all. You don't understand what makes Destiny, right? It's like you're running that risk. And so, but if you position it more as I did this thing for you specifically, in addition to my other generic work, it takes the risk side down a little bit.
It can be double-edged sword, right? I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, I've worked with Eric, again, specifically, and I hired somebody on your team who had some really amazing stuff that would exist in Destiny. It wasn't in the game, and maybe it ended up there eventually, but we looked at the portfolio. They're doing what we want them to do. It was really cool. Recently, in the last couple of years, working at Epic, on the flip side of that, we're hiring an effects artist, and the test is, I can't say exactly what it is, but you're making an effect that would fit in Fortnite, right? And they decided to recreate one that's in the game, and it wasn't as good as the one that's in the game already. And the team was like, the guy who made this is reporting to me, and this is a bit worse than what we actually, it was a bad look. So it can help or hinder depending on the way that it's done. I would always, avoid this sort of direct copy or attempt at a very close facsimile to it, and complement it. The stuff you talked about, Madden, was really cool. That's the sort of stuff I think we as a team want to see. It's complementary, exists in the world, and it talks to it already, but it's not a carbon copy.
You also have to make sure it's good, because if it's not good, then it's almost like you're insulting the person that made that thing, right? You want to make sure it's good. So, yeah.
Okay, so you actually started to touch on what I was going to ask. What is everyone's take on art tests? Are they still standard? I know some places actually start paying. I don't know how common that is. How much has changed within art tests? Do you find them useful?
Art tests. Do you guys do art tests? Are they useful? What are your thoughts on art tests?
We don't do them, and we didn't at Turn 10 really either. I shouldn't even be talking because we don't do them because I think we've had mixed reports with art tests that sometimes they can be hard to ascertain, what their true skill set is based on what we've given them. I guess I don't have a lot to say other than we don't do them, and I haven't found them particularly useful in the past. But I know other teams do.
I want to get you in a room with every manager I've ever worked with. It's still super common at all levels. In many studios, it might be different. Some studios, I know some places will test you no matter what level you are. Others might stop once you reach the senior level and just say, your portfolio speaks for itself. It will really depend. I don't think my opinion on them matters particularly. it's not positive, but I don't love it. It's a big ask.
It probably adds work to the recruiter too, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work for the candidates. It adds time to the process. It can be a lot to juggle. I think there are other ways that we can get that information, but it's I think always an ongoing conversation with the team. You mentioned like paid art tests. Personally, I think that would be an amazing thing to do for everyone. But logistically, it does sound also a bit of a nightmare. How do you track the time? What's the compensation look like for a new grad working on a test versus a senior working on a test? I don't have those answers. I don't want to try to come up with them either, but I think it would be great in a perfect world for sure.
And I want to throw one more caveat in there as far as like paying someone. Is like, does that mean that then the studio can use that thing legally? Like, there's a bunch of sticky things in there.
Yeah, and I think that's actually where that practice originated, was lawsuits, people taking unpaid art tests and using them. I think the test thing is a really great metaphor for the fundamental dynamic that never goes away when you're hiring people, which is both people on opposite sides of that table have like a lot of fear about what's going on. It may not be obvious to folks who haven't had a job yet, but and you hear these stories about layoffs and all this. It's really hard to get rid of somebody after you've hired them. I mean, I've had some amazing bad things that my employees have done over the years, and it's still really hard to get rid of people. It's traumatic for everybody involved, so people are really afraid of hiring the wrong person. And so the test thing springs from a bunch of stuff. Like if I ask you in an interview question, do you know a lot of Python? You can say yes. And unless I'm, devoted to the craft of being a hiring manager and I know how to ask questions that will tell me whether that is actually true or not, I have to either, what do I do? Take your word for it, right? Or do I make you take a test? And if I make you take a test, do I have to put you in a closed room where you don't have access to the internet? Do I make you whiteboard code stuff? I mean, we got some Bungie vets here. The Bungie coding hiring process is notoriously awful, actually, because of exactly that, right? Some people believe in putting candidates under pressure because they think, well, it's going to be a pressurized job if you work in the industry, so we got to see if you crack. At Valve, we had to take certain people off the interview loop because people would go into his room and come out crying. And, so it's just like, this was a thing, right? Like some industries still do that bullshit, right? So, and then there's fairness questions, because on the one hand, like if we give everybody the same test, right? It's a lot harder to say, well, we all took the same test. We're not discriminating against group X or group Y because they all took the same test. And then somebody else will say, oh, but if you make the test that takes 4 hours, what if it's somebody who's a young parent and doesn't have 4 hours in the evening? So it'll never go away, is I guess what I'm really saying. The dynamic of like risk reward for the hiring person is going to make some people reach for that tool. And the dynamic of wanting to get hired is going to make some people try to cheat, right? They're going to be sitting there with their like meta glasses on or whatever, trying to get the answers. So be prepared for it to happen, I think, is the real thing to say. Is no matter what we all think about it, it's going to happen to you at some point. Go into it with good grace. See if you can learn from it, right? And pay attention to the quality of the hiring processes that you go through, too, because you're going to see they're all over the map. Some companies do not give it any thought at all, and they just sort of like, they treat it like a meat market, and that's a terrible mistake, but it's incredibly common.
I was just going to say, too, like another, I feel like tests are not going to go away. Everywhere I've worked just had a test, and they've all been, some are 16 hours, or you have 16 hours to do this, or some use an external tool called HackerRank for your rigging test, or whichever that is, that will track exactly how long you were in the test for and give you results, and it does a whole scoring system for you. So there's like tools out there that companies can utilize. Paid is pretty rare. I remember Disney tried to do that at some point, and it was just a nightmare from a legal standpoint. I would say I would lean, like some studios are leaning more towards that temp option or a contractor first, and then they would call that a conversion to like full-time. It's kind of honestly like a try before you buy. So maybe you want to take a temp job for 3 months, they see how you do in the opportunity role, and then that is a way to kind of show, hey, you you can work at this studio, or the skill sets that you work through in the interview process match up, and now we want to convert you to full-time. I see that a lot of companies going that route as an option.
Yeah, that's what we did.
Yep.
And that's,
Yep.
I find that to be way better.
Yeah, I agree.
The other little grace note on that too, we've been talking pretty much exclusively about US hiring. It's different in other places. So particularly in Europe, they have the same sort of prisoner's dilemma problem when they hire, but to the nth degree. Because if it's hard to get rid of people in the States, it's impossible to get rid of people in Europe. And so a lot of times you will get on, you're only ever going to be hired on a contract basis. Sometimes you'll only ever be hired for your whole life on a contract basis, but if you're going to go for full-time, they will have a defined period during which it's the only time they're going to get to fire you. So everybody works like incredibly hard for the first 9 months, and then they kick their feet up and take 4-hour lunches. But
Canada has like a probationary period employment law, and then like Europe, when you give your notice and you would change and go to another, it's like if you put in your notice and want to join another studio, you have to give a 3-month like notice period. Whereas most places here in the US, people like to do 2 weeks as like a standard. No, the standard there is 3 months. So think about that from like putting your notice. If you've got 3 months to work and you're waiting to start on your next job, right? So there's all different like employment laws as well.
Yeah.
There's one thing I want to touch on before we leave tonight, and that is the actual interview process. So I want to ask about, just in general, I have 2 primary questions. The first question is, what do you see as the best interview strategy? Like, how do you suggest people go into an interview, and how do they prepare for it? It's a hard question, I know, but I think it's an important one because interviews are hard, right?
They are. I would say there's a couple of things. First thing is, it's not a test, it's more like a date, right? I mean, that's when you go on a date with somebody, there's this whole thing that both of you are doing. You're feeling each other out, you're like, what's this person like? Poke here, like, you mention things without pursuing them because you're waiting to see if there's a reaction, right? Like a good interviewer, this is actually, you'll be able to spot, right? Good interviewers want stories. They don't want factual answers. You don't say, tell me how much Python you knew. You say, what's the worst thing about working in Python, right? Because it doesn't really matter what the answer is. But the way you tell me that story, if one person is all hung up on some like syntax thing, and a different person is like, it's all about performance, and a third person is like, oh, I can't stand it because I'm, I want to work in a compiled language, which is safe, right? That kind of stuff tells me a ton about you that if I asked you point blank, you wouldn't tell me, right? And so when asked questions, give stories, because the stories are more revealing of who you really are. And pay attention to what kind of stories they seem to be fishing for. Like if somebody's, tell me about a time when there was conflict on your team. The question is, are you really an asshole? Right? Because it's like, you ask that question and 1 or 5 people will say, well, this person was a jerk, and that person was a jerk, and that person was a jerk, and that's why things didn't go right. Which is, of course, actually telling me that you're the jerk. So narrative, conversation, that's all you really want to have. It's not a test. It's not like, I'm a South Korean student and I'm going to jump out a window if I don't get a good job on this, right? It's like, no, you got to just walk in there, be yourself, and make it visible who you are to the person on the other side of the
So
table.
with stories, I'm so glad that you mentioned stories. Steve, would you suggest that people go into an interview with multiple stories ready to tell?
It is great to have a few queued up. What you don't want to do is walk in and give a speech. Right? But what you do want to do is, especially after your 3rd, 4th, 10th interviews, right? You have a repertoire, and you kind of know, if we get into this area, I will end up telling this story about that funny time when such and such happened, right? And it's okay for it to be humorous. It's okay for it to be embarrassing. You can tell stories about how you did things wrong and then recovered from it, right? All of these are actually not bad things. Like the plastic, phony perfection approach, any good hiring manager will see right through it anyway, so it's not worth your effort.
One thing I like to do and I like to see people do is if you come in prepared, one is just be enthusiastic for yourself. Everything that was said before is 100% accurate. Like you're the worst interview is when you come in and you start asking people questions like, give me a time where you had to solve a really difficult problem. And they're like, there's this one time, but it wasn't that bad. And then it's just one sentence, and you're like, this is going to be a long hour. Those are really hard. So we want you to be engaged. We want you to really be there. One thing I think makes a successful interview is to really come in with a point of view. This is what I am bringing to the table. These are the things I am good at. And my whole portfolio, everything I talk about, it's centered around those things. So if you are looking for those things, this is what I'm confident I'm bringing to the table, and everything that you're talking about is around that. And if people ask you about things that you are not good at or you're not confident about, also be honest about those. Say, nope, that's not what and maybe if that's not what you're bringing to the table and that's what they're looking for, it's still better to be really honest about that. So just go in prepared with, here's what I'm good at, here's what I'm still learning or I'm not good at, and I'm super willing to learn, and be really honest about those two things. And I'll actually super appreciate if I ask somebody like, are you good at this particular thing? And they're like, nope, that's something I've never touched. I'd love to, I'm really interested in it, but I haven't. I don't know anything about it. I actually really like that. I like to know that honesty. So just go in prepared with that, and then everything about the storytelling is the next part. Like, you just want to have a good, engaging conversation. You're like, yeah, I could see me working with this person. They think through problems really well. The way they communicate is really great. This is going really well.
I think you guys are both very eloquent about that. Like, everything you said is very much on point. You often will hear frameworks when answering questions, the STAR method and other things like that. I won't dig into that right now, but I tend to ramble a lot when I talk, and so trying to find different frameworks and things out there that you can refer to kind of keep in mind of how to move a story forward instead of just a one-sentence answer or a 20-sentence answer, to really tighten that up and tell a story. That's how I would prepare. You already talked about it yourself. Like they both said, hiring teams can smell BS a mile away. So be humble, be willing to learn. That really is, as a new applicant, a new job hunter, there's no way you know it all. So that desire to grow, is really, really big for teams. They love to hear that. Talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. It's not always going to go well. We want to hear. I tell everybody when I prep them for interviews, we want to hear your war stories. We want to hear the things that didn't go well and how you recovered from that. Hopefully you recovered from it. Otherwise, maybe don't talk about it. But be able to show how you've grown, what hasn't gone well. This game development is really, really hard. Something I keep hearing. Talk about what you've done. I think that's what they want to hear. They want to know what it's like to work with you at the end of the day.
All great things. You all rock. I'll add there, it's like creating your own little pitch. What's your pitch? You practice it with your other classmates. They could be the opposite interviewer. They could be the recruiter, and you're the candidate, and practice with them. Have them come up with 4 questions for you related to a job. Look up the job of a position that you might want to go for, and you can both practice that way. So you're practicing your pitch, and you're practicing answering questions that you don't exactly know, but a friend does, and you're going to walk through that, and then swap, and kind of say, I would give them feedback and say, walk through, I would say it a different way. You rambled a little bit here, and it's all practice, right? You have these resources with you in this room, so I think it's a really great opportunity to kind of go through and do those, we call them mock interviews. So usually I will do that if I do a resume presentation or something like that, and then we'll walk through these mock interviews to practice. So I think that's also a really good thing to especially do since you're kind of learning and getting into the process for early in career.
One other thing I want to touch on, what about asking questions during the interview?
Do it.
Yeah,
That's
awesome.
the number one thing.
Yeah.
Actually, the one thing that you can prepare that really does make sense to prepare, bone up on the company and the products they have done in the past, the thing they're likely to do, and then ask intelligent questions about how the position you are being interviewed for fits into that, right? Because it shows that you did your homework, which is flattering without being obviously ass-kissing. And it also gives you an opportunity to show like you can actually learn something, right? Because like if you're like, I really love that game, what was it like working on that? And then they tell you this story about 2 years of unending crunch and people's marriages falling apart, whatever. You're like, well, I learned something, right? It is, again, it's like dating. You're looking for red flags as well as just desperately begging to hook up. So
I will say that not asking questions is a huge red flag for me. So we allocate 15 minutes of the interview for the person we're interviewing to ask us questions. And if we get done with our part and say, now do you have questions for me? And they go, no. Then we're like, oh, I guess we end early. That's super. I mean, we want to see that you're engaged, that you've thought about this, that you want to know about our company and what we do. Like we love that. So yeah, that's a super great point.
I want to just throw this out there real quick. What? Oh, I'm not going to ask that. Would you say that the worst question that you could ask is, so what games have you guys made?
Yeah, that stuff that clearly betrays ignorance of the person and that you have done no homework is just like that's a strike right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joey, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you certainly have throwaway questions like what's the culture, what's the environment, work expectations, things like that. You probably should have answers to by the time you're at a panel interview. Maybe if you don't know that information, we definitely ask it. But what I like to do is look up who I'm talking to, right? I just look them up on LinkedIn or wherever. I say, oh, they've worked at Epic for 10 years. Okay, well, they were there when Fortnite shipped. What the heck was that like? I want to hear about this stuff. So learn something about it, right? Because it's game development. It's fun. There's a lot of really neat stuff that you can, as a fan, hear from the people that you're going to be potentially working with. So I like to write down questions specifically for each person, at least one or two. And maybe you don't ask them all, right? Maybe you have a couple that you'll go through throughout the day, but vary the questions up, because in a feedback conversation afterwards, we all get together in a room and we say, talk about how it went, and oftentimes they'll say, oh, they asked me this, and then all 7 other people are like, they asked me the same thing. Did they ask anything else? No. That's a little sus, maybe it isn't great. It's not bad, yeah, it's better than nothing, right? But make sure you vary them, and you can get a lot out of it too. You're itching for something.
Yeah, I am. Because you said something, I was like, oh, that one. I think the other avenue is, like, sometimes there might be an unannounced game, or maybe it's an indie studio that hasn't made a game yet. So they might not even have a title out, but they might have something that says, we're making a mobile game. Okay, we're making a mobile casual game. Okay, great, you've got something. So what are the other mobile casual games maybe you play? So then you could talk about that. Sometimes there's not always going to be exactly what game they worked on, but there's other places that have a history that they've been around for 30 years and they've made 6 titles, right? So then you can reference that, but some more indie studios or smaller studios haven't released anything yet, or they didn't get greenlit, or they tried to make one before, and now they're trying their second game, right? So that can happen, but I would recommend, then just what has the studio, what type of genre, or maybe there's something online that you could look up on their, company page or something along those lines.
But you can also, and again, this is where the recruiter comes to help.
Mm-hmm. You
can contact the recruiter and say, hey, who's interviewing me? Who's going to be on that panel?
Yep.
And then you can ask you can look up those people and, oh, they worked on this. Oh, they worked on that. It's like, you ask the question, hey, I see that you worked on this. How does that relate to this current job? There are a ton of questions. If you do your research, you should have a bunch of questions that you can ask.
And recruiters do prep calls. So before there's a panel interview, I'm going to say good recruiters do prep calls.
Yeah.
And I know Joey does prep calls. Okay? So just saying. But prep calls to be okay, we'll normally do a prep call for 15 minutes, walk you through the interview process, what to expect, who are you talking with, here's some categories of areas that we might focus on from an interview process, who's going to be your point of contact, how quickly I'm going to follow up with you after, what to expect. That's what a recruiter is, your friend. Again, we want to make the hire, so we're going to be your friend throughout the process.
And use these are another opportunity to gain a connection. So even if it doesn't go well, use this as an opportunity, even maybe to, hey, do you mind if I add you on LinkedIn? Or, you can even, some people won't appreciate this, but you can even follow up and just say, is there anything I can do to, especially as students, we're much more willing to follow up and say, like, here's some advice for you and things like that. It's another opportunity for you guys to, just cement some connections as you're starting to get into the industry.
She's got her question. She's her hand up forever.
Oh.
Well, it's funny because you actually touched on it. You mentioned watching out for red flags in an interview, and I was hoping you might give us some examples of like red flags that say, maybe don't work here.
So the question is, what are red flags in an interview?
Well, certainly, like, you kind of want to get a sense of what a company's attitude towards people's ability to maintain a relatively stable life is. Like if people brag about how hardcore they are, right? I mean, there are going to be people who don't mind, right? If you're 23 and you don't have a family and you don't have, you sleep on somebody's futon, right? Like maybe you don't care if you spend 60 hours a week, but that's your call. But you don't want to walk into a job where they expect 60 hours a week out of you without knowing that in advance, right? That has to be a reasoned choice. If you hear about a lot of people diss their colleagues, right? Like if so-and-so, oh yeah, you don't listen to those guys, they don't know what they're talking about. Like don't listen to the people in the first interview, they don't know what they're talking. Like that is like, get the hell out of there right there, right?
So when you're interviewing someone, what are red flags that you see that they shouldn't do?
I've got one. If you want.
Well,
So don't talk poorly about like your other company that you work for. So that is a big one. It actually comes up more than I would like to say, but it does come up. Where we're like, okay, like Joey mentioned, walk us through a difficult like challenge you had on a project or whatever. And then sometimes that rolls into just talking poorly all about that studio, the team, etc. And that's just not a very positive experience for the recruiter, but it also tells us, okay, you might be doing that with the team if we were to bring you on board. So that would be like a flag.
Do that all the time.
Yeah, and it happens more than we would like to say. So I would definitely say that would be a flag. Like if I was interviewing somebody and that came up pretty hard in the interview, I would definitely let the hiring manager know.
Yeah. Blaming is just generally a bad thing to do in an interview. Blaming defensiveness, right? Like I was going to say, we were talking about questions before. The other great thing about questions is you will eventually get thrown a curveball. Somebody will ask you something and you have no good answer. The worst thing you can do, there's two things you can do. One is like, you can freeze, right? Or just give a kind of grunt monosyllabic answer. That's terrible. But if you can buy yourself some time to let the brain gears re-engage, then you could probably at least exit gracefully from this awkward situation. And the best way to do that is to ask a question. So if somebody asks you, like, tell me about the time have you ever done a flexible, tell me about doing this flexible spine rig, and you've never done a flexible spine rig, like, well, can you tell me a little more about what you mean when you say flexible spine rig to make sure I understand before I answer, right? That kind of thing, because you certainly don't want to go charging off down one path on incomplete information anyway, but every time you ask a question, you're gathering information to give a better answer to the question they asked you, right? And being willing to stop and say, let me think about that for a minute. Because like a lot of people cannot stand dead air in the interview. That is like, and it leads them to blurt things out or to babble or to wander. It is way better to say, give me a second to think about that. And then say, what if we did it this way? Or maybe we could do it that way. If we did it this way, it would cost a lot more memory. If we did, like that kind of thinking out loud is way better than sullen silence or grunt, just kind of like flat refusal to answer the question, right? If you come off as somebody who takes the information in, reprocesses it, tries to work with it, that's good. And questions are a tool for that, making yourself look like that.
Yeah, so hi, thank you guys so much for coming. I'm Evelyn. And I wanted to hear a little bit about how what makes a good tech art portfolio, where you might not have as much immediate visual information, especially if you're doing things like pipeline work, where they expect you to know a lot about different areas. And it's not like just a pretty image or a pretty animation.
Right. So that's a
Yeah. To rephrase it for the mics. particularly with the tech art portfolio. And I'm just gonna leave that to you, Steve.
Okay, so the number one thing there is like problems and solutions, right? You lay out the problem you had to solve, and then the solution. It's perfectly okay, especially in an interview context, to talk about the explorations and dead ends as well, right? Because part of what you're saying when you do that is I'm adaptable, and part of what you're saying is I won't make that mistake again. And so, like if you don't just put up a screenshot of your auto rigging tool and expect people to know how cool it is, right? If you put up that screenshot and you say, this is how I designed it, this is what I was asked to do, this is why it works this way, this is the part I don't really like, but it's okay for now. Here's a video showing how the tool actually works in practice, this is why the design went that way. It's very much the same thing we were saying for visual artists, right? Which is the artifact is not the point. The story that goes with the artifact is the point. That's the most important thing. With technical art portfolios in particular, you really want to be like, here's the sort of the constraints. If you show me an auto rigger with 75 buttons on it, right? I'm more likely to think you didn't need 75 buttons than, oh, look at how feature rich that is. You show me one with 3 buttons, I'm gonna be like, that doesn't feel like enough control. So why are you at one end of that spectrum or another? Because if that was a request from your animators instead of the way you wanted it to look, if that was built on somebody else's thing, it's a very different story, right? And since so much of what we do is worming around through the infrastructure of past generations, a lot of times you're doing things that you're like, this was actually a really hard problem, not because it's difficult math or something. It's a hard problem because somebody said we had to have 27 character file limits or whatever the hell it was, and blah, 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 right? People will groove on those stories because that's all we ever do is deal with other people's bullshit, so.
Cool. One last question. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. It's a lot of pressure to be the final question.
Better be a good one.
Thank you so much. My name is Michael. I really appreciate all your wisdom. I had a lot of questions about what Joey called the online presence that you will see when you're looking into prospective hire. And this is embarrassing, but you also mentioned LinkedIn recommendations. I'd never heard of those until tonight. And I was wondering, would it appear amateurish to any of you looking to hire someone if we recommended each other or just other students from our work on student projects? Because I don't have indie games, I don't have game jams, but I really believe in members of my team. And I would write so many of them an enthusiastic recommendation. Is that okay?
So the question is, the question is, as far as LinkedIn recommendations, like, is it okay and how valuable is it for students to give other student recommendations?
That's a good question. It was a good one.
I think it can be helpful if, I even had it from a professor wrote me a LinkedIn recommendation because I helped with a big student project from a recruiting aspect when I was in school still before I had graduated, because from my internship at Lucasfilm, and I learned a bunch about recruiting, that I went back to all of the art students and I was like, this is what we need to do. This is what I learned from how we needed to look at reels, build these out. And so I did this big project. And so my professor actually wrote me a recommendation because I wanted to go into recruiting. So he's like, this was related to the project and what I wanted to do. So I feel like that was super helpful. I think classmates could work if you've worked on a big project together, or maybe it's a student film that you launched or a game that you specifically worked on. Eric wrote me a recommendation when we worked together, and I had to find a new job after a huge layoff at one of the studios, and I thank you for that. And here we are today working on a thing. But
Joey, you didn't ask. which actually is not a bad thing. Ask.
To ask, and I ask, and then I'll say the preface of what I would prefer, maybe what we, how we partnered together, or a certain area of recruiting, or a specific project that we did together. We did a lot with events when we worked together, actually, in talks. And so that was something he mentioned in the recommendation, and that's something that I like to do as a recruiter, and here I am today, right? So I think if it's relevant to sort of either the direction or career path that you want to go, I think it can be helpful.
especially if it's based on shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just we lunch buddies isn't gonna cut it, but like we were on the same game team, you know, we were in the finals together, whatever.
And I also want to say, very generic, oh, he's a great person, this and that and the other. Not that great. If you can call out specific things, just like we said before, if you can call out specific things. They were the producer on this project that we had that was so unhinged, and they solved all these problems. That's the kind of recommendations that are valuable.
Specifics.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So like that example, like Eric and I worked on to do like event stuff, where we would partner together and talk to not schools, but we did some stuff with ArtStation and other things like that. And I had asked him, and that's what he talked about in the recommendation, because I know at another company that I would work for, I would get to do these things as well, and it's something that I enjoy. So I take it as like a skill set that I feel like I'm good at, that I enjoy and like being a part of, right? And so I was really thankful that he was able to do that and work that for me.
Amy is good at that, so. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Ted, go ahead. I got one more question.
Sorry, kind of about the LinkedIn recommendations. I think the specificity is exactly how it works. It's tied to a project, so you have to request. Look, every company I've ever worked for, every project I've reached out to somebody I've worked with that I know is going to give me a good recommendation, and it's tied to that project. That's just how LinkedIn works. Just kind of summing up things. It took me a long time to figure out that you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. You're like, Steve kind of was touching on it a little bit about, oh, if they're bragging that they work 80 hours a week, and if you don't come in on Sunday, don't bother coming in on Monday, that might be a red flag that that company is going to chew you up and spit you out. So just kind of figuring that out and asking those questions about what kind of company do you want to work for. I know it's right now it's like, I want to work for any company. I want it, to get my foot in the door. But it's, just, think about it that way.
Just like with dating, desperation doesn't sell. Actually, the one other thing that's a really good question when you're talking about interviewing the thing too, it's really good to say, to ask about the project and then say to the second interview team, I asked the guys in my first interview about this project, I'm curious to hear what you say about it, right? You don't have to tell them exactly, you don't have to play telephone. What you're looking for is if everybody tells you roughly the same thing about the project, that's a great sign. If you get like wildly divergent answers about what's important, what the project's really about, what's the heart and soul of the studio, whatever, that's a red flag, right? Because a functional, good company to work with, studio, people are more or less aligned. Never perfectly, but more or less aligned. And so look for that too. That's a really good radar to develop in your career in general.
Plus one.
And then one last thing. Sorry. It just, after 30 years of doing this, these are the little like random thoughts that pop in my head. Steve and Matt, I know you've been hiring managers for 30 years, but every company and every hiring manager is going to be different. Recruiters, they're on the phone talking to people all day long. They're people. I've gotten lots of hiring managers that are very good at what they do. They're great at coding, and they don't really know how to talk to people, but they're now managing a team. So the hiring manager questions and stuff, because Steve was like, if you, as a hiring manager, take the time to learn how to interview, there's going to be a lot of times when the person that you're opposite the desk from doesn't know how to ask you questions. So there's thousands of companies out there, thousands of different people. It's not all one fits all. So just keep that in mind.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We give a hand to the back. Thanks, everybody. I have one last thing, and I'm going to put Amy on the spot here. Amy, I know you're a recruiter. I know you have LinkedIn on your phone, right? Can you open up your LinkedIn and see who the first person here was who sent you a connection request?
Oh my gosh, I love this!
So excited.
Oh, please.
Oh, there's a prize.
Seems rude to do it during the talk.
I don't have like barely. Like, I've been waiting for my LinkedIn to load.
Hold on, internet is spinning.
I think that this
In the room.
Okay, I think the difficult thing is though.
Small network.
Is that?
Got like nothing.
Oh, there's. Did you get on the DigiPen network?
No.
Let's do that. Matt will tell you what it is.
Okay.
See, do your research though, because each of these people except for Steve were listed on the flyer.
This one?
So
This one?
you connect up there too.
This one?
So at the beginning of this, before they started speaking, I was actually sitting here thinking, would it be crass or self-serving to flat out ask if it would be okay to add them on LinkedIn? And they answered that.
Yes.
But that's where I was sitting when I started, which is why
Yes.
doing it before the thing, before they knew who the heck I was, seemed like it would just get dismissed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Also, like
It's popping now.
whenever I do these things, I always get people who ask me afterwards. So yeah, you can always reach out. Put it that way, you can always reach out.
I have 21 messages
Yeah,
calling out, but that might just be delayed. Let's see. Okay, this is
Actually, a good bonus skill to develop is finding the stupid QR code
Yes,
thing.
I have a screenshot of it.
I want to meet the person who decided to put it in the. You have to type in
It's
the
so
search
dumb.
bar.
It's
like
so dumb.
Epically bad UX.
I was at
Yes.
GDC and I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to take a picture of your LinkedIn page and I'll connect them.
At GDC, I just switched my
Remy.
phone home screen. Like, so
Remy.
All right.
Accept. We're in. You got a prize. Good job.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.